Microsoft just released their financial results for the last 3 months, and it's suffice to say that Microsoft had an amazing quarter. So here are the figures. Overall sales were up considerably and topped off at 23.20 billion US dollars. If you take out the cost of assimilating Nokia into the company, pretty much taking care of employees, etc., the overall profits were 4.5 billion US dollars. The Wall Street prediction for Microsoft for this quarter was actually around 22 billion US dollars, but Microsoft definitely beat them by a fair margin. So here are some of the key facts. Sales in general grew 25% over the past few months. Mostly sales came from their consoles, their servers, their tablets, and their phones. And the tablet industry, Microsoft Surface, is actually at a billion US dollars now almost. By the next quarter, it should actually touch a billion. And this can be attributed to mostly the phenomenal success, phenomenal reviews of the Surface Pro 3. Um, and another interesting fact is that Microsoft shares are at the highest they've been in more than a decade. I think even more than a decade, maybe even 14 years. So that's definitely some good news for the company and definitely good news for the new CEO who is definitely reaping the benefits. So now let's look at how this news affected the stock market. Because as you know, stock prices are basically dictated by news, or at least micro fluctuations in stock prices are dictated by news and what companies release, earnings calls, stuff like that. So today, in general, shares were up almost 1.5% because the Dow Jones, Nasdaq index, everyone, the U.S. economy is doing really well. But after their earnings call, Microsoft shares actually rose by almost 4.3%. And I mean, after hours are still going on, so we'll find out tomorrow what the actual jump in percentages. But it's suffice to say that they're pretty much going to beat, maybe reach like 48 shares, um, $48 a share, or even more. Because the results, despite Nokia's acquisition, despite spending $2.5 billion on acquiring Mojang, are definitely like phenomenal. So now let's talk about gaming because that's what pretty much we're concerned about. So in total, Microsoft has sold about 9 million Xbox One units. Um, they sold more than 2 million Xbox consoles during the last quarter. The surprising part is that the Xbox 360 is still doing really well and it's selling a lot of games, which is quite surprising because sales of the PlayStation 3 have pretty much died and no one's buying any games for it and everyone's pretty much selling theirs off. Um, Apart from that, we also knew that there are more than 20 million paying Xbox Live customers, and overall, there are almost 100 million Xbox Live members. So now let's compare Microsoft with the competition. Apple obviously released their iPad and whatnot um, soon, or recently, and they're still the most valuable company, which is understandable. Microsoft is actually the second most valuable company now because it just beat Google by a few million. I believe Microsoft is worth like 372 billion now, and Google is worth around 360 billion. Um, but definitely Microsoft is ahead by a couple of billion. Now let's talk about the gaming side of the market. Sony will have their earnings call next week, and they've already told us that they predict a loss of around $2.5 billion now. It might actually be higher, but we'll just have to wait until next week to see how high that loss actually is. There's also this rumor that they've stopped research on the PlayStation 5 and any other future technology because they just don't have the funds. And there was this other huge blow that came to Sony this week because if you know about Daniel Loeb, he's kind of like at least he claims he's like an activist investor, but he pretty much sold his stock in Sony. He like dumped the company. He's like, I just can't do this anymore. I'm just gonna not recover my money. I have to get out now. So he sold like about more than $1 billion worth of stock. So that definitely was a huge blow to Sony this week.